And a lot of your work questions the assumptions that we have about ourselves, like what you just put in now, that we're these really weird, unstable, flawed beings. So let's just admit that, and then we can move forward. I mean, a lot of...
Yes, I mean, look, I think that one of the ideas that I've always been really interested in is the concept of imperfection. And, you know, in the modern world, largely because of science, we have an ideal of how we can perfect our lives. You know, out in Silicon Valley, these guys who are pioneering, you know, what the late 21st century is going to look like, are looking to eradicate death. That's the ultimate goal. If you're a young tech person, your ultimate dream is not to have to die. And of course, none of us want to die. But imperfection stalks us. I don't think we will ever overcome it. And indeed, the quest to be immortal, to be free of blemishes, to be always correct, to say and feel always the appropriate thing, is in itself a form of madness and wrongness. And I think that we best accommodate ourselves to the conditions of life by accepting in an a priori way that we are flawed, those around us will be flawed, we will make errors, those around us will make errors. We are largely in the dark, therefore we need to go easy on ourselves and be generous towards others. We need to adopt, if I can put it this way, a tragic perspective on life. Greek tragedy was born from the insight that only the gods know, that we humans are blind creatures. We stumble into error, and we must be kind to ourselves and others because we're constituted out of base and imperfect matter. In Christianity, we find the idea that we are originally sinful. You know, the concept of original sin. We are the heirs of Adam and Eve who ate from the tree of knowledge and who were not perfect beings, and therefore none of us can be. Now, I'm an atheist, I'm a committed secular person, but I love this kind of mythology around imperfection that begins in the Garden of Eden. If you look at Buddhism too goes from the idea that life is suffering. That's the first rule of the Buddha. Life is suffering. In other words, we creatures are primarily well set up to find the glass half empty rather than half full. We register pain more than beauty, suffering more than joy. And once we know this about ourselves, we become more bearable and life becomes more livable. I think one of the questions that we should all of us know how to answer of friends, family, a date that we're on is, how are you crazy? You know, it's not an insult to be asked, how are you crazy? How am I crazy? All of us are crazy. The question is just how. What particular bit of craziness have you inherited? All of us have inherited different bits of crazy, but you know for sure, without needing to talk to anyone, that they are going to have supped from the cup of human craziness. And that isn't a pointed insult, it's actually the most generous thing you can say about us humans. And if I can say one thing against America, why am I talking like this to a nice American like you? I don't know. But you know, the United States was founded on a kind of millenarian utopianism by people who came across from England with a vision of building the New Jerusalem. And the idea that Jerusalem could be built on this land at this point, not in the next world. Now, for me, the genius of Christianity was always that these guys located paradise not on this earth, but somewhere else. Because if we have to expect that we're going to build paradise on this earth, my goodness, we're going to be fed up when the train runs late, when our politicians don't say what we want, when our lovers aren't as perfect as we wanted them to be. We'll be in a rage because we thought there was going to be paradise. We thought that happiness was a right rather than an occasional amazing thing that might visit us in an otherwise dark and tempestuous life. So I think that it all depends on your starting point. And one of the things we try and do at the School of Life, we are a self-help institution, but my goodness, one of the first things we try and do is to say this life is imperfect. And you know, if you're suffering and flawed, it's not that your life has gone wrong, it's that you are human. And that's the basis upon which we, you know, start all our work. But, you know, rather than this being a come down or a humiliation, most people are really happy to embrace it. They're like, oh, right, okay, so my sense of myself as strange and oddly flawed and always making mistakes, this is not some individual curse. This belongs to the human race at large, even though the adverts are not going to tell us that. And once we can provide that kind of public reassurance, it's very moving. You know, one of the things we do at the School of Life is we have conferences a couple of times a year, and we gather 500, 1,000 people in a large hall. And one of the first things we do is to say to people, you know that all of us are trying to be impressive. You know, the first thing we do when we meet somebody new is try and impress them. And we try and impress them through our status and our power and our flawlessness. But actually, what wins us friends, what truly breaks down barriers between people, what wins us enduring loyalty and love and ultimately safety is the revelation of vulnerability. You cannot be friends with somebody if all you're trying to do is tell them how great your life is. The beginning of friendship is the acknowledgement of pain. It's on that basis that you break down barriers and turn a stranger into a friend. So we tell our people who gather, we say the doors are shut, no one's on Twitter, this is between us. But could you turn to a stranger on left or right and tell that stranger something you're ashamed of, something you regret, and something you fear? And at first, there's a deep intake of breath. Everybody's like, really? Do we have to do this? I thought we were just going to shoot the breeze, right?
Right.
But
then they embrace it, don't they?
They embrace it. And people love it because it's an opening to a channel of pain that the conditions of ordinary life mean that we normally cannot reveal, but a longing to reveal. And you know, one of the things that we pick up, and I pick up so much in my work, is the depth of shame and isolation and loneliness under which people labor. You know, we think we're in a social world, we think we're in a connected world, but my goodness, we're not. We're still in we're still taking the first stumbling steps towards acknowledging what it's like to be a human being